Good morning. My name is Stephen Nolan. I'm the Managing Director of the UNDP Financial Centres for Sustainability, and I'm also Director of the Irish-based International Sustainable Finance Centre of Excellence. I'm live from Dublin this morning, where we have a fantastic panel to discuss what happened at COP28. And all our participants today were at COP28 and very active, and then also look forward to the rest of this year in terms of 2024 and the sustainable finance agenda as we build towards Baku. We're joined by an incredibly impressive global leader group of panel today. We have participants from Beijing, Madrid, Geneva, and Astana. And as I said, I'm here in Dublin this morning. We're looking back at COP. As I said, everybody was there at COP, and then what are we trying to achieve this year? On the panel today, we've got Dr Ma-Jun, who's the founder and president of the Institute of Finance and Sustainability in China. Dr Ma-Jun is the former co-chair of the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group. We've got Eric Usher, who's the head of the UN Environment Program Finance Initiative, and we'll come to Eric in a few minutes. Hundreds of firms working with Eric and his colleagues on this initiative globally. We've got Aigul from Astana International Financial Centre, and obviously COP29 will be in the region this year, so really interested in what Aigul is looking at in terms of this agenda. And then we've got Antoni Ballabriga from Spain, who is the Global Head of Sustainability, Intelligence and Advocacy for the BBVA. Maybe Dr Ma-Jun, if we can start with you first, please, sir. I was thrilled to participate in one of your COP28 events in Dubai. As always, a packed room and Chen Lin and colleagues driving the agenda. And I'm going to come to your talent initiative in a little while as well, which I believe you launched at COP29 or COP28. But if you can maybe take a step back for a moment, Dr. Ma-Jun, you know, I've said it before, and I mean it genuinely, you considered one of the godfathers of green finance at a global level. From the People's Bank of China to the G20 co-chair Sustainable Finance Working Group and everything else you've done in between, and you've helped so many different countries around policy and regulation and sustainable finance. What was the trigger, sir, if I may ask you, to get involved in the area of green finance, Dr. Ma?
Thank you very much, Stephen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Great. Thank you again. And also thanks to FC4S for inviting me to join this conversation. Now, on your question of how I get started in green finance. In fact, I was a macroeconomist by training. I spent 20-something years in the World Bank, the IMF, and Deutsche Bank as a macroeconomist before I embarked on this journey towards green sustainability, carbon neutrality, and so on back 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to actually host an event in China. I think that was a little more than 10 years ago, 10 and a half years ago. And on that day, the event was held in Beijing, and we realized that the PM 2.5 figure went up to 1,000. I guess all of you, especially Eric from UNDP, you know what PM 2.5 means. 25 is a safe level, and the number at that time in Beijing was 1,000. It was killing a lot of people, right, because of the air pollution. And I then heard from WHO that pollution, including air pollution, water pollution, land contamination, led to early deaths of more than 10 million people per year globally. And that was a shock to me as an investment banking economist, because we were essentially broking a lot of deals to facilitate capitals to the dirty industry at that time. We helped to finance the coal industry, the coal-fired power generation, the steel, the cement, petrochemical, everything that emits 2.5, a lot of carbon, and the investment banking industry, together with a lot of other investors, made a lot of money out of that. And that's not sustainable. So I sort of suddenly realized that this landscape had to change, and incentives was wrong to drive the capital into these places. And we need to change the incentive structure, the signals, so that more capital need to go to the cleaner, greener, low carbon areas. So that was a trigger. And immediately after that event, I became the chief economist of the PBOC. So I was lucky to have opportunity to engineer this new idea within the central bank of China of creating what we call a green banking. In 2015-16, I led the drafting of the green finance guidelines in China. And I think this is one of the best implemented policies in the Chinese financial sector in the last 10 years. And now we have the largest green lending market in the world, 30 trillion RMB outstanding. And we also have the largest green bond market in the world, 2.5 trillion RMB outstanding. And we essentially use this money to finance the largest renewable industry in the world, the largest EV industry in the world, and the largest battery industry in the world. And going forward, I think the journey is towards more of a transition. And as many of you realize that last few years, we were pushing not only in China, but also globally, especially the G20 level transition finance, which means that we should be financing not only the pure green activities such as renewables, EVs and so on, but let's finance the transition activities in steel, cement, petrochemical, and of course, biodiversity as well going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dr. Ma-Jun. I saw Eric nodding his head there when you're talking about one of the most successful implemented policies in the Chinese financial system. Just staying with you still, Dr. Ma-Jun, if I may. As I said, I was delighted and thrilled to be invited by yourself and Shen Lin to participate in one of your panels at COP. As always, you were much in demand at COP. Going into COP, what were your hopes for the Dubai COP? And with the outcomes, were you pleased? And do you think we need to do more this year in terms of implementing that? Please, Dr. Ma-Jun.
Yeah, I was focusing on a lot of issues in the last few years, especially when I was wearing head with the G20, and I was playing a role in NGFS, International Platform for Sustainable Finance, on issues which I think require international coordination and collaboration. And roughly, I think 4 major items that I've been working on. One is the interoperability of taxonomy, which was triggered by the problem that's emerging last few years. Now, I think globally we have 300 taxonomies, close to 300. There are 300 different ways of defining what green activities are, which causes a lot of confusion, especially for cross-border green capital flows. And we need to do something to enhance interoperability, comparability of the green standards or definitions of labeling practices. And that's why myself and European colleagues, we initiated this common ground taxonomy idea back 4 years ago, and it's now up and running. The common ground taxonomy based on Chinese and European taxonomies are now being used by issuers issuing green bonds internationally. And the second topic is really ISSB. And again, it was a lack of coordination leading to too many standards, frameworks, principles for disclosure, and creating a lot of confusion, market segmentation, and even risk of greenwashing. And that's why G20 a couple of years ago endorsed the launch of ISSB. And now my team in Beijing is supporting the ISSB office, Beijing office, for more dissemination capacity building globally. And the third topic on global level is transition finance. And as I said, the G20 2 years ago put out this transition finance framework, which is consolidating a lot of good ideas from markets on how transition finance should be defined, should be guided, should be incentivized, and so on and so forth. I think this is actually being translated into a lot of national actions. In fact, last year, I spent a lot of time helping Chinese local governments implementing the G20 transition finance framework. Now, 7 local governments came up with the transition taxonomies already in China, and some of them putting incentives, for example, interest subsidies to support these transition projects. And the last topic, which I spent more time last year at the COP, is to launch this capacity building alliance of sustainable investment, which you were supporting. In fact, by the time I launched it in COP, it was 42 organizations globally that joined this capacity building alliance, which we call CASI for short. And as of now, it's 50 organizations globally. And we have all the knowledge generators, distributors from all continents now part of this capacity building alliance, which I think will play a very important role in facilitating knowledge transfer, and the exchange between countries, especially providing training opportunities for emerging markets, developing countries, which will, I think, really resolve the key bottleneck of sustainable finance growth going forward in these emerging market economies.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ma-Jun. I really appreciate that intro into our panel today, as always, from that global perspective of global leadership. So what I've taken there is that interoperability, around us. Then we have ISSB, transition. And Tony, will come to you in a moment because you are the panel member who's actually financing a lot of these activities with BBVA. And then the last thing there around capacity building. And you're right, you use that word there, the bottleneck. I think we can all agree in this panel, if we don't get through that bottleneck of capacity building or lack of talent in this area of green and sustainable finance, well, we won't hit the targets that we need to in terms of transition. Dr. Ma-Jun, I'm going to now move to Eric, if I may, in Geneva. So from Beijing to Geneva. Eric, great to see you as always. The last time we saw each other was at COP. It was very hot. We were walking down the boulevard. And again, like Dr. Ma-Jun, you were incredibly busy launching various different initiatives or participating in various different panels. If I may, just for our audience, Eric, UNEPFI is one of the biggest platforms now in sustainable finance globally. I think you're in around 170, 180 staff across, principal sustainable insurance, PRB, some of the net zero alliances, and I know Butch is now going live with a new platform around insurance in the coming months. Very, very exciting. Eric, similar to Dr. Ma-Jun, how did you actually end up in this leadership role in the whole area of sustainable finance, if you don't mind me asking? No, Sam from America.
My apologies. Now I'm with you. Thanks very much, Stephen, and wonderful to be with you, with Ma-Jun, with Tony, and I think to reflect on another COP, and I think so the work ahead. My start comes actually from the energy sector, including in the renewable energy sector, and then the financing and emerging markets of renewable energies, back when they were far smaller industry than they are today. Fantastic to see the growth and the numbers out of China are truly impressive when you see a market go to scale. And what this means for the decarbonization of the energy system globally. So essentially, I came from that perspective, that part of the real economy, and then coming into the UN and eventually ending up with the finance initiative. And we've grown very quickly in recent years, as you've mentioned, and that's really because this topic is growing very quickly within finance, and this is no longer a niche, impact investment type sector. It's really about how do you integrate the notion of impact across a banking business, across insurance and the capital markets, and this is a trend which has been a positive one. Going back maybe about 5 years, and Ma-Jun had talked about some of the early points in China. Europe has moved very quickly, but this is a global phenomena. We have the Inflation Reduction Act in the US. Which has been also moving very, very quickly, mobilizing private sector to come in, but also in Latin America, in Africa and the Middle East. We see this really as global, and it's one part addressing climate, but it's two part essentially how do we develop our economies and how do we do it with finance that has a better understanding essentially of the impact of both positive and negative of its financial portfolio, of its loan book. And we are seeing the banking sector, if we talk about them, increasingly focusing on understanding that materiality. So it's both financial materiality, but also the impact materiality. Do we know what clients are doing with our capital? And can we help them in navigate some of society's biggest challenges, foremost of which climate change?
Great, Eric. And Eric, at COP yourself, in terms of the team there, how big now is UNEPFI? Kind of maybe is it maybe to the assets under management, and how many firms have actually signed with the various different initiatives, please, Eric?
Yeah. So we're the part of the UN that works with different parts of the finance industry on establishing these frameworks or norms for responsible conduct. The first framework was Principles of Responsible Investment, established in 2006. Principles of Sustainable Insurance, 2012, and most recently the Principles of Responsible Banking. The PRI is the framework for the capital markets, how they integrate ESG into an investment activity, an investment business, either from the asset owner, asset manager, or even the service provider perspective. The quasi-totality of, or almost all large institutional investors are signatories of the PRI. About 30% of the insurance market is signed up to the PSI, and we're about over 50% of the banking sector signed up to the PRB. And in just the last 4 years, we also have, as you mentioned, the Net Zero Alliances, which are part of the wider GFANZ umbrella, and under that, the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So it's essentially the climate accelerator of the PRB community, is already over 40% of global capital managed by the banking sector, which are signed up, which have set net zero targets and are working together to define the frameworks needed to essentially move forward. And I think the overall trend, I would say right now, coming out of Dubai, aiming towards Baku and more widely, is that we've gone from a period of high ambition. But really today it's about implementation, and that would apply equally to parties, so governments. Essentially, most governments have set a net zero target. 2050 is the objective for many countries, 2060 in China, 2070 in India. But the real challenge is, how do you connect that to actual real policy action? And that actually implements that target. And I think we are not seeing everything that we need to, and we hope to see more progress made going towards Baku. And the same thing within banks or other parts of the financial system. The majority has set targets today, and now it's all about how do you get the follow through. And the final point would be, it's not about decarbonizing financial portfolios. It's really about how do you work with your clients on how you help them navigate this transition. So if you're working in the cement industry, in steel and agriculture, in infrastructure, how do you understand the transition pathway of that sector, that industry? And then how do you work with your clients to make sure that they're going to be leaders and not laggards in that transition, with all the financial implications, the opportunities and the risks that implies?
Thanks very much for Eric. And again, I'm going to go to Aigul next, but that's something I'm going to be coming to Tony about. And I know with UNEP and UNDP, with the European Commission support, are also working in Latin America on taxonomies. And Dr Ma-Jun mentioned that earlier on. That's really important and great to see the common ground taxonomy and that interoperability already between Europe and China. That's a kind of a great challenge statement there, Eric. And actually, it is a challenge statement for the Dublin-based International System of Finance Centre of Excellence this year. It's their year of implementation. And it is, as you said, the government's industry connected to real policy action and supporting that transition. And as Dr Ma-Jun said earlier on, and what we're seeing here in Ireland via the Sustainable Finance SkillNet, is over 3,000 Irish-located finance service professionals already upskilled in some areas of sustainable finance. And if you don't have that talent pool or get around that bottleneck, as Dr Ma-Jun said, well, we won't be able to support these firms in transition. Now, if I may move on to a financial centre, because we have the global perspective both yourself and Dr Ma-Jun have brought. And then Aigul, if I may just actually zoom down to Astana International Financial Centre, a very active member of the UNDP Financial Centres for Sustainability, a network now of 43 financial centres, with the most recent Australia and New Zealand coming on board. Aigul, you were very prominent and you were very active as well at COP28. In terms of what you're doing at a local level, can you give us a snapshot of what the priorities are for Astana International Financial Centre in this area, please?
Right. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you for having me here. So, yeah, we're part of COP28 last year, and in fact, there is, let's say, the line we're seeing there, the event, and we see that the transition finance is growing as a concept, and as it was stated in some of the documents there, we see the transition fuel gas is being also recognized, and for us, it's of importance because country is still relying on the fossil fuel a lot, and most of the countries in the region in Central Asia and also Azerbaijan, which will be hosting the COP this year, have a similar, let's say, economic perspective. And for that reason, we see that transition finance is going to be a priority for most of the emerging economies, including Kazakhstan. And if we speak about priorities for AIFC, in December, just before the end of the year, we actually listed the first sustainability-linked bond at Astana International Financial Centre. And basically that bond size is totally like 100% of the current thematic bond market size in Kazakhstan. And we see quite a, let's say, quite a potential in that market for Kazakhstan, and I would say that the priority for us will be developing further this concept and just maybe updating on the regulatory part in Kazakhstan. As you may know, we have the standard for green projects, a green taxonomy adopted in Kazakhstan, and this year we're amending it to have the transition finance, the transition projects included until 2035 to recognize the fuel, the gas projects, and we hope that that will help to boost the SLB market here.
Brilliant. Thank you, Aigul. And that's, again, a great perspective from a financial center that's in the region where we're going to be in Baku later on this year for COP29. But as you also pointed out, the reality on the ground in terms of your economy as well, and that the transition. So I'm thrilled that you would make it today on the panel. Tony, if I may switch to you, I'm unsure. I think you may be based in Madrid today, so forgive me if it's not Madrid, but you are based in Spain. But you're with one of Spain's global leaders in terms of banking, so you've got a global footprint, in particular into Latin America. Tony, you've had a very interesting journey as well. I know you've been on Eric's steering committee. I know you've been involved in the different UNDP initiatives over the years, and now your new role within BBVA. What has your journey been like in terms of bringing the bank with you, Tony, or working with the bank on this agenda, please?
No, thanks a lot, Stephen. Great to be here with all of you and sharing our journey and our views and experience as a practitioner. Yes, we see the challenge, specifically the net zero challenge, as a big business opportunity. So obviously we are embedding this into our risk management. Also, we are embedding this also in all our advocacy role, trying to promote the systemic change. But we see this measure as a big business opportunity, no? And well, we saw COP28 as a probably the best COP since Paris, no? But as Aljaber said, no, we are what we do, not what we say. So I think that COP had some relevant implications for banks, for European banks, and also banks that are present in emerging economies, no. So coming back to the Eric's point, I mean, we are members of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and practically 50% of the banks at the Net Zero Banking Alliance are European banks. And I think another very relevant point at COP was the more relevant topic of the credibility. The UN system is pushing on to provide credibility and recognition for non-state actors. That's also another very relevant outcome from COP, because this means that we have to build on the robust frameworks that we have as the NCBA, no? And another key outcome of COP from our perspective was also that it reinforced the EU Green Deal. And finally, I would say that obviously nature and just transition is gaining momentum. So when all banks, as also at BBVA, when we have to upfront this challenge, all the three major challenges, nature, climate, and inclusive growth, are interconnected, and so this is something that we see COP after COP, but after last COP, we see that it's even more relevant now. And finally, let me also share an insight that I think it's very relevant, is that we see more and more importantly the role of innovation. So as the International Energy Agency pointed out in their latest net zero scenario, today practically 65% of the technologies are practically in the marketplace. So we have increased significantly on the last 2 or 3 years. So not only in terms of those technologies that are ready to scale up, like renewable or energy efficiency or mobility, but also in those technologies that was mentioned before, no, in those sectors difficult to abate. So I think innovation is gaining momentum, and is helping us to have this window open. So that's our views as a European bank.
And Tony, I'm going to go to Dr Ma-Jun because I want to zoom in on transition and what Aigul said. But if you can actually look at Spain for a moment, and you read the newspapers, and there's a near crisis situation in Catalonia, Barcelona, around water. So how dire is the situation? And from the perspective of a bank, to develop infrastructure, and Eric mentioned earlier on that each country's net zero plan, 2050, 2060, 2070. Yep. Anybody in infrastructure knows that you can't just go in and start digging up a road now and put a windmill, or it takes time, and get the finance in place, get the planning permission. So from a Spanish perspective in terms of Spain's transition, Tony, what is BBVA's role within that, please, if you don't mind, perhaps some examples? And that obviously links back to the EU Green Deal.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's come back first to the role that we have as banks. We are the middlemen. So our role is, as was explained before, we are the ones that have to help the whole economy to transition, not only to finance those green activities, but also help all those activities in difficult sectors that needs to be transformed in a certain way. So our role is not to reduce our finance emissions. Our role is to finance emissions reduction from our clients, and that's the first point. But as you said, other topics are emerging, and in the case of Spain, we are now obviously beyond farmers strikes that we have, but also we have problems in water, and water is we start to see water as a material topic in our let's say in our clients, and we are connecting all in one. I mean, we are engaging with our clients to help them to transition, but we have to help them in a more holistic way. So if you go into a cement company in Catalonia, we have to engage them not only to see how we can help in the technological transformation they have to do in terms of carbon emissions, but also we have to help them to manage water resilience, no? Because it's absolutely a key dependency on their business. So that's the conversations that we are already having with our clients, trying to connect and focusing on water, because water probably is the most relevant topic for us, not only here in Spain, but also in Latin America. So we have relevant dependencies from some segments from our portfolio, and we start to see how to connect all in one in the conversation. But let me also highlight a very important idea for us. I mean, the transformation will only happen if it has economic sense and if it is fair. So again, we need to reduce green premium for a lot of different activities, and we have to invest in innovation at a massive scale. We are not there at that moment. So according to the World Economic Forum and the latest net zero industry tracker, we need close to $14 trillion by 2050 in those sectors difficult to abate, no? And only in Europe we have a 50 billion gap year after year on this innovation, no? And we think that banks, we can play a key role on that, and so the financial sector has a key role, but we need the right environment to have the right incentives to develop the risking mechanisms to promote this innovation that needs to happen. Otherwise, we are not going to succeed. So that's a very important for us also here in Spain and Europe. No?
Thank you very much, Tony. Dr. Ma-Jun, thank you for staying with us. I could just maybe come to you now, sir. Just on that, you know, as Tony said, the transformation has to be just, it has to be fair, has to make economic sense. You mentioned transition several times during your opening remarks and the importance of transition and transition finance. I know that your work in the Institute is not just limited to China. It's actually global in what you and colleagues do. What are you seeing at that global level, if I may call them clients, forgive me, that's probably the incorrect word, but partners, in terms of different transition? And I know Aigul mentioned earlier on what Astana is doing, and I know your colleagues are also working in that region. What are you seeing, Dr. Ma-Jun, in terms of transition at kind of the political level and then within the financial sector? And who is further ahead, if that makes sense, please?
Thank you, Stephen. I think I'll probably start at the global sort of a level. That was 2 years ago when I was still co-chair of the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group. This group produced the G20 Transition Finance Framework, which was based on a lot of good market practices already. And that framework, I think, is still is very useful by highlighting 5 key pillars. And each of these key pillars are actually not very easy to implement, but at least knowing these 5 pillars are important. The first one is to define transition activities. If you don't have a good definition, you may end up with what we call transition washing, right? Another sort of a kind of a greenwashing, but in the transition space. And diving into the specific measures to the definition of issues, there are 2 broadly sort of agreed approach. One is a taxonomy approach, And that's why you have already seen last couple of years, a lot of countries and regions and financial firms come up with a transition taxonomy. And in China, this is being practiced. As I said, the 7 regional governments came up with a transition taxonomy. Some of them had, for example, 120 transition pathways listed for 9 hard-to-abate sector, and others have maybe 70 or 80. So they're focusing on the carbon-intensive sector of that particular region. And by doing so, I think the benefit for the financial institution and banks is that it's much easier to identify the appropriate technology pathways. Of course, it should not rule out other possibilities. That's why I was telling many of these regions that you can ask your clients to pick the technology from the table, which is called taxonomy, but other possibilities should be open. For example, if it's not in the list, then if you get a third party to verify your alternative technology can still credibly reduce carbon, and that will be still usable and financeable. The second pillar is the disclosure piece. Disclosure for transition activity is much, much harder than the pure green activities. That's why I often say that disclosing the environmental information regarding a green project is like taking a photo. Disclosing transition activity is like shooting a movie, because it's really about process of 30-something years in moving from a current status towards net zero. So all the actions you will be taking in terms of technical pathways, investment projects, governance arrangements need to be decided and disclosed properly. And the third pillar is the financial products. So far, we have seen a lot of debt instruments like sustainability linked loans and bonds, but I think in many places, the equity financing is actually more urgent because these transition companies don't have enough equity to raise debt to start with. And the fourth issue is about incentive. I think quite a few mentioned the need for incentive for transition activities. It's more urgent than pure green because a lot of pure green sectors such as renewables, auto, EV and battery, they actually make a lot of money already. They don't need a government incentive anymore. They can finance their activities with very cheap money. But the transition companies tend to be very difficult in presenting their case. In fact, pretty bluntly, a lot of these transition projects are not bankable yet, and we need to make them bankable. That's why incentives such as fiscal, regulatory, carbon markets will be very important. And the last pillar is the just transition, which you mentioned. It's not a focus in many countries yet, but it's beginning to be treated as a required element in some localities, such as the Huzhou pilot region in China. They actually require all the transition companies getting finance to measure and report the impact of the transition on employment. If you're going to lay off more than 10% of your staff members, then you have to do something. For example, you have to create a training program for reskilling, and so that these people can more easily find job elsewhere. And with that arrangements, the government will give them incentives. For example, giving them interest subsidies for those transition plans with a just element. So I think some of these are very interesting, and we need to really have more dialogue of these emerging best practices across jurisdictions.
Thank you for that, Dr. Ma-Jun. And if I may actually, Tony, I'm going to just jump around for a moment. Tony, can I come back to you? Because that was an interesting point that Dr. Ma-Jun made. A lot of the transition projects may not be fully bankable at this point. So how do you as a bank work with clients to get them to a point? Or is that your job, Tony? Because I imagine there's a lot of detail within that to try and help clients understand. Or is that also then the bank looking back to government from a regulatory and a policy perspective and saying, look, this is what we're seeing in the market, and these comes back to the type of incentives that perhaps are required to stimulate further investment? I'm sorry, Tony, that's not quite an elegant question, but I hope you can get a sense of what I'm trying to ask.
No, I think Dr. Ma-Jun did the right point. I mean, there are some technologies that are ready to go. They don't have green premium in general. So there's those technologies, we don't need additional support. We need to deploy at a scale. What we need there is faster permitting, less bureaucracy. That is also a key topic in all regions, not only in Europe, but also even in US and also in emerging economies. But then there's a second layer of technologies that are not ready at the right moment. The business case is not clear, and they suffer the death of the valley death, no, because if they don't scale up, it's impossible, and they are not bankable in some cases. So that is where we need ambitious programs from regulators, from governments, no, like the IRA that we have in US. In Europe, we have a promising Net Zero Industry Act, which is that is going to be approved just now, coming days, and identifying 10 different sectors, 10 different activities that are critical for Europe. Also providing some ideas to promote faster permitting, also creating some sandboxes for innovation. So good music, no, nice music for our ears. And some critics says that the problem is that there's not a specific additional funding for that, as the IRA is a specific funding, but not for Europe. But coming back to your point, I think in Europe we have an incredible asset that is not everywhere, which is the ETS trading system, where today we are getting practically 38 billion euros every year, and 30 billion euros are, let's say, delivered to member states. We should ask to member states to use some of those funding to promote clean tech and to promote innovation and to promote the risking mechanisms for this innovation, no? And especially important because the ETS will practically multiply by 4 the funding available in the next 12 years. So Europe has the opportunity to use a big part of that new funding to promote innovation at a scale in Europe. So I think that's what we need as banks, because we alone, we cannot provide the full solution that our clients require. No? So that's important why we need these signals and incentives from governments.
Thank you for that, Tony. And I suppose Europe, like China, the capital is also global, and it can be supporting, as Dr. Ma-Jun said earlier on, emerging markets, developing economies as well. And I'll come back in a moment to Latin America, Tony, because you got a big footprint there. Eric, if I could just jump to you, please. We've heard there that obviously the transition framework of the G20. I know, if I remember correctly, you have some staff that contacted into the Commission. You were helping on the Commission's work, International Platform for Sustainable Finance. You were involved in a lot of these different initiatives. And I know innovation as a word is often misabused, or it's quite broad, and sometimes it's hard to get your head around innovation. But what are you seeing, Eric, if I may ask that question, within the firms that you're partnered with around the innovation agenda? I suppose at the instrument side, are you seeing anything new come out, or is it actually looking at instruments that already exist and are upgrading them for the transition agenda, as Dr. Ma-Jun outlined?
So let me step back and frame why is the reason that we are getting large investments in innovation in this space today. And if we go back to 2015, just in the September and the lead up to the COP, Mark Carney put out his speech at Lloyd's of London on tragedy of horizon. And at that point, the tragedy was that the investment horizon was not aligned with the longer term horizon when climate change was going to have its impact. And as back then we were talking about stabilizing global temperatures by 2100. What has changed since then is the horizon has moved forward significantly to the point that today, both unfortunately, the climate impacts are happening today and everybody can see it. So from a physical climate impacts side, it's moved forward. And also from the changes, the transition is happening, both in terms of policy changes, policy implementation, and technological innovation. And so now what's happened is the tragedy of horizon essentially has gone away because the change is happening within the business cycle. And so lenders, corporates themselves, investors can see the changes are getting underway, and that you as a corporate actor, you need to decide essentially, are you going to be a winner in this change? Are you going to lead the pathway within your industry to be a first mover and making sure that you are still solvent and actually are taking advantage of a new investment universe? Or are you going to be a laggard? You're not paying attention to these risks. You're assuming they're not as bad as you hear, and that you're sort of battening down. I would say the majority of industry in some regions are fully on board and essentially are making the changes that are required, and that creates real power to innovation. And of course, the innovations are not so much in terms of the climate science. A lot has been done there, but it's really about how do you decarbonize every sector really of the real economy. How do you work within the steel industry to think what does it take to come up with low and no carbon steel, cement, agriculture, etc., the food system. And so I think that the pressures and the drivers for innovation are more than they've ever been. And it's a two-part, both from seeing the physical climate impacts taking hold, but also that the notions of the transition are getting underway. Within the climate sphere, of course, there's a lot of innovation happening. The science is getting better. We would say there's a new data ecosystem which is building out because a corporate actor or an investor or lender to that corporate to actually have the data required. And Ma-Jun talked about the taxonomies. We need to have interoperability. We need to be clear what is green, what is low carbon, what is transitioning, etc. And a lot of this, particularly when you talk about physical climate risks, you actually need data from the ground. So if you are a large multinational, what's the data on every one of your manufacturing sites, everywhere that you operate? And so we need a new type of data ecosystem that can generate that sort of information that then provides decision useful information. So in terms of the climate scientists, the climate ecosystem, that is growing. But of course, the real action, I would say, is within the specific industries. And we hear a lot as Ma-Jun spoke about, renewable energy. This is where I started my career 30 years ago. It was, a bit of a curiosity, if we could say, solar industry. Today, it's no curiosity. It is the dominant form of new power generation being brought onto the grid. Electric vehicles, they were seen as, as essentially glorified golf carts not that long ago. Then you had the Tesla effect that showed that actually this could be a better product. And now we have the significant upgrowth, not only in Tesla, but with all the Chinese providers, the battery companies. Innovation backs all of this. And every technology which is seen to be, I don't want to call it curiosity, but a very niche player, quite quickly it can change the nature of the market. And I guess the final point in terms of corporates, if I can call it the Tesla effect, nobody's sitting back any longer because they realize that their industry is going to be upended if it hasn't already. And therefore, once again, they need to be part of the solution providers to drive innovation, to be on the front end of that transformation rather than getting left behind.
Thank you for that, Eric. It's the first time I've heard the glorified golf cart expression, but actually now you said it resonates with me. Aigul, if I can maybe just come to you at the financial center level in Kazakhstan, in terms of this innovation we're talking about, what are the challenges? Because as Eric said, the innovation is not just technology, it's also in how we're collecting data, how we're looking at data, how the lenders, the financiers are actually using data. And a lot of this data actually resides with governments. And it's how to, so at the financial center level, what type of activities are you taking to unlock that data for industry? And what type of innovation are you seeing? I know you mentioned sustainability-linked bonds, but what other activities you see within corporate Astana, please? As you said, and it's great to have you on the panel for this very point, given the mix of the economy that you're in, you have to transition, but how much of revenue is actually generated out of fossil fuels is quite significant.
Right. Yeah, I want to also come back to the point done by Antoni regarding the projects for transition finance and identifying that. In fact, I'm kind of wearing two hats here, representing the financial center, but also as a part of Green Finance Center, we're also providing these external review services on the ground to the developers of thematic, let's say, projects in the absence of other SPO providers. And we can see that there is a, of course, growing demand for green bonds. We see a lot of green projects, but in fact, there is not much pure transition projects, because we understand that there are 10, maybe 15 green assets, pure green assets in the world, but the rest of it should be, should go through transition, right? And the thing is, we don't see that pipeline of projects on the ground. And that's one of the things where we need the innovation, right? To help these industries actually to go to decarbonize. That's one thing maybe I want to point out. And regarding the data, it's quite important actually, because we've been working closely with the government in terms of incentives. So when we put the green taxonomy in 2021, we also put this incentive scheme for small and medium enterprises developing green projects in accordance with the green taxonomy. So those project developers could get incentives to cover the expenses for the interest rate of green loans and for the expenses for green bonds. But the thing is, we still don't have that accurate data on the green loans. So what's the green loan portfolio in the banking sector of Kazakhstan? And that's quite crucial, to understand where we're standing, right? To know where we need to get and what's the issue right in between. And this year we initiated the collecting official data from the banking sector to understand what's the portfolio, green portfolio of the banks. So we did our own estimates, and the raw data we have in our hands shows that the green portfolio of the banks in Kazakhstan is like less than 2%. And the thing is, the amount of investment we need for reaching carbon neutrality by 2060, which we pledged a couple of years ago, it's more than $600 billion. So we need this massive investment, and we need to connect the banking sector right with this investment. And for that, we need to understand where we're standing. And we do hope to have this first, let's say, data collection this year and use that, to the government to leverage this incentives part, to provide more incentives and cheaper funding. And one more point maybe to make here, as I'm representing the AIFC, but we also have exposure to the other emerging markets in the region in Central Asia, working with Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, supporting the first green bonds issuances there. So the thing is, when we went to COP, we might take an example of Africa, which is collaborating very well to put actually the region out there on the map. In terms of Central Asia, for instance, we don't see that much interest from the investors to the region. And I believe there's maybe a way to kind of maybe put the region on the map. And first time, I think last year, the region made this effort adopting this regional strategy on adaptation, and which was presented actually at COP in our joint pavilion. And in fact, this is the maybe way to go for the region, to attract more investment, united, not each country, separately.
And thank you for that, Aigul, because again, the focus is going to shift to the region now, but it should be a permanent focus rather just because COP29 is coming to the region. But then I suppose, how do you take advantage of the next number of months is going to be key. I'm just conscious we've got a few minutes left and everybody here has got a busy day. And Dr. Ma-Jun, you're nearly at the end of your day, and the same is true middle of your day. Cole, Eric, you're starting, as is Tony. But some questions are coming in from different from participants. And one of them, Dr. Ma-Jun, if I can maybe focus in on this with you, and it's just interesting, how do developing nations gain access to climate and biodiversity finance? Now, I know Aigul just mentioned Africa there a moment ago, but just what are you seeing right now? Because I know you partner with a lot of these emerging developing economies on the specific question, how to gain access to this type of funding.
Yeah, I personally think we need to put in a framework for biodiversity-related financing. And this framework has to have a few elements. One is defining what are the nature positive projects. You should tell me more clearly what are the qualified projects so that finance can go there. And this is a very typical request from bank. Don't just tell me, do nature positive thing, but tell me what to do. And in our case, some Chinese cities have came up with a nature positive taxonomy, which you use to guide the banks. The second thing is about disclosure, which I think will largely follow what TNFD is doing. And I think ISSB is taking the TNFD contribution. But I'm telling David Gregg that can you make it simpler instead of presenting a few hundred different indicators of biodiversity impact of activity or activity impact on biodiversity? Give me 3 so that bank actually can execute. The third thing is about the financial instruments, especially with blended financing features, because a lot of nature-related projects are not yet bankable at this moment. They're just not making enough money. And we have to be smart enough, indeed, case by case, to design these projects, putting some money-making elements together with those essentially charity projects, so that the whole package become attractive for private sector financing with a little bit of a government incentive and MBD type of TA and grants. The final one is some sort of external support, which could be taking the form of carbon markets, for example, the voluntary carbon markets. And it's now, I think being developed in many different places. I'm quite hopeful that some of these methodologies, especially related to forestry related carbon products, can be used as an important incentive for subsidizing the nature positive projects and for financing some nature positive projects.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dr. Ma-Jun. That question came from Donal. So I'll give the panel one last question, if I may, and then let you go. Today's session is supported by Skill in Ireland, which is the Irish government's training and capacity building agency. It supports the Irish Sustainable Finance SkillNet network, which, as I said, is upskilled over 3,000 Irish located finance professionals in this area of sustainable finance. Everything from CSRD, taxonomy, 3 new postgrads in the last 14 months around disclosure and reporting, compliance and innovation. And it's just fantastic to see what it's doing, and it's become a global exemplar. So as we build towards this year, Eric, Dr. Ma-Jun, Aigul, Antoni, as we build towards COP, and the COPs are good because they already have a period of reflection, but also, as you said, Eric, it's about implementation this year. What are the key things now that we need to focus in on? Taking Eric's challenge statement, it's about the year of implementation. So maybe, Eric, starting with you first. What are you, as the head of UNPFI and your colleagues, really focusing on this year in terms of that year of implementation, please? Kind of the last input from you, please.
Yeah, so I would break that into 2 parts. In terms of the topic matter, and Ma-Jun and Antoni had referred to this, we really shifted from the notion of what is a transition plan, and that's very critical for companies to understand, and increasing expectations from regulators to have a transition plan, to the question of how do you finance a transition plan, so transition finance. And if you're looking from a portfolio level, if you're going to try to work in the hard to abate sectors, if you want to play a role in helping transitioning, it actually could increase your carbon exposure. Your footprint could go up if you're buying into a sector or companies who you want to help them to transition. So there's the need for a lot of methodological work on what is transition finance, taxonomies and the like. The second part, in terms of operationally, we're moving from having centralized expertise, so climate or environmental social risk management teams in a centralized place within an organization, to getting it out into the sectoral business lines. So we need someone who actually understands not only carbon and carbon footprinting, but the cement industry and how you're going to decarbonize it, steel, agriculture, as I mentioned earlier. So how do you get the talent pool out into the business units? And to you're referring to the need for training, for upskilling, incredibly important. And we are seeing a real wave of interest from the mainstream part of these corporate actors and within the financial industry to basically understand this opportunity area, and they're looking for the skills. How can we get active? How can we become leaders in this transition? A lot of the young people have an opportunity here because there's not decades of experience, and so you can define yourself in terms of your expertise quite quickly. So the opportunity is there, and we need the tools to help them get them to achieve that.
You're making me feel old, Eric, because I don't think you were including me in the young people definition there. Maybe if I shave off the
welcome to the club.
Thanks very much. Aigul, maybe with you, COP29 is coming to the region, capacity building. What are you really focusing on this year, please?
Sorry, I was muted. So we didn't touch upon the sovereign issuances and let's say the priorities in state funding. But most of the emerging economies, the economies are mostly dominated by the government, by the state still, and that's the case for most of the countries here in the region. And for that reason, since last year, we've been working with the Ministry of Finance here in Kazakhstan on legislative initiatives to have the ground for sovereign issuances. So we do hope that Kazakhstan will be joining those sovereigns issuing the thematic bonds, green or SLB or sustainable bonds. And we're currently working on the budget code and other legislative things to have this ground in the coming years. We hope that that massive investment we need for the carbon neutrality will be in a way funded through the sovereign issuance. That one thing. And another thing I want to touch upon here is the just transition. So we've been working on social taxonomy for a while now, even though it's not picking up in Europe. It's quite relevant for Kazakhstan. Interestingly enough, I think around 30 or 40% of thematic bonds issued in Kazakhstan are social bonds, and 80% of them are gender bonds. So basically, this is kind of a topic which is relevant here, and we do hope to finalize that project this year. And we actually expect you, Stephen, to be in Astana in June to have a conversation around this topic within our conference, if you remember. And another thing is, I mentioned earlier, is transition finance. We still will be focusing on that since most of the potential in the region is in energy sector. And that's where we see the, further work to be done.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I look forward to being in Astana in June, and obviously FC4S Gender Working Group, which I know you're very active in. So looking forward to that. Tony, maybe just to you, please, sir, in terms of that kind of broad question this year of implementation.
Yes, no, what we are focusing now is first how to scale up and create really additionality to what we are doing. So we want to embed sustainability in all of what we do. So we are going beyond at a granular level with not only for CIB clients, but also for enterprise, SMEs, households. So there is a massive process to really spread that at a massive scale within our bank. Second, another priority for us now is investing in industrial knowledge. As I explained, innovation is key, and for those sectors difficult to abate especially, and we need to have the right knowledge to advise our clients and to have this strategic dialogue with them. So we are investing, we are connecting with external hubs, we are investing in talent, to have this industrial knowledge as a key competency for BBVA. And the third idea that we are focusing now is on connecting nature, especially water, and just transition into our transition planning. And finally, let me say that another idea that we are focusing on our advocacy role beyond our business, which is asking to develop governments to provide more support to MDs. This is absolutely critical for the next COP. So we need investment at a scale in emerging economies, and 80% of that investment will come from private financing. So we need public financing going higher from that 100 billion, and we need more blended finance, more the risking mechanisms, and we need to consolidate the world reform from the World Bank and see how we can scale up on that, because otherwise we are not going to succeed. And as a bank, as we are 70% in emerging economies, it is absolutely critical to have this support, otherwise it won't be possible.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tony. Dr. Ma-Jun, I started with you, so I'll give you the final word, if I may, please, sir. Year of implementation as you build towards Baku, what would be your top 2 to 3 things we really need to zoom in on now, or even the top 1 thing, Dr. Ma-Jun, please?
Maybe just one topic which I have not touched upon, but I think it's being mentioned by many others, including Antoni. That's a green technology. In fact, yesterday I was hosting a big event in Hong Kong on Green Tech Summit, and we were expecting 200 people to turn up. And in fact, in the last day, we got more than 1,000 applications to join this conference. Just show the massive interest on green and low carbon technology, which I think will fill the gap in many of the activity we're talking about, especially on transition. Indeed, I strongly believe that 50% of the technology are not ready for commercialized usage into the technology. We need to connect the technology guys with finance and with application scenarios.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dr. Ma-Jun. So I just want to thank our panel. So as I said, live from Dublin today, thank you for our colleagues in Astana, Beijing, Geneva, and Madrid. It's been a real pleasure being with you today. I think for me, A lot of what we've zoomed in on today is transition and transition finance and transition planning. And as Eric said, perhaps gone beyond the transition plan, companies should know, and the regulators are doing more in that, but it's now around how do we finance those plans. So really zooming in on transition finance, the different methodologies, the standards, and that interoperability was a key word that Dr. Ma-Jun mentioned. And then going back to Tony, how do we scale up? And then Astana International Financial Centre is a great example of what's happening at a local level, but in the region where we're all going to be descending on later on this year for COP29 in Baku. There are several running polls taking place in the background. So if you're listening, feel free to participate in them. I want to thank the Institute of Bankers for hosting us here today in their studio, and of course, Skilling Ireland for supporting this session. Thank you, Dr. Ma-Jun. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Aigul. And thank you, Eric. The next session is at 10:45 GMT. Thanks, everybody.